Colonial Outpost, 1550 to 1650. All right, so you have European nations had several key reasons, several objectives of why they want to start to send people, explorers, and create colonies in the Americas. One of the reasons is they want to provide a return for their investments. So the monarchs and the sponsors are wanting to create and establish trade routes so that they can start to get goods, to start paying them back and creating a line of wealth for what they have spent on the explorers to be sent on these expeditions. They're also going to want to gain knowledge. They want to know the territory. They want the geography and the different resources and the people. They want all that stuff to be documented so they know what America is like. But they're also going to face different challenges. We're discussing Europe and the people who are financing these explorations to go over to the Americas. So some of the challenges that they're going to face is they don't know if the indigenous groups, the Indians, are actually allies or if they're enemies. This will lead to a lot of different confusion and conflicts, and the European nations, who are all the different countries, France, Spain, Portugal, England later on, they're all trying to gain different wealth and different territory. And of course, we know that there's already people, communities, Indians living in these territories. So you start to have some religious and nationalist conflicts. You're going to start seeing some wars over in Europe that are going to start dividing Europe. You're going to have different conflicts between the Catholics and the Protestants. And those conflicts that are going on the European continent, over in those countries in Europe, are going to all come over and be transplanted to the American colonies from these different countries. So you're going to have the colonies starting off with different alliances and political issues and rivalries that came over from their mother countries. Okay, so we have Ferdinand Magellan. He's the guy who is going to sail around the globe. He actually, a little quick story, he does not return. He actually dies at sea. And his crew is going to make it back to show that it is possible to sail east by going west. So that's what he gets credit for. Okay, so this kind of jumps into the French attacking Spanish ships. All right, so we already have colonies that the French have claimed for their monarchs, and we have the Spanish colonies that Spain has claimed for their monarchs. So what you have is these ships that, as they're going over to the colonies, to these different territories that they're then claiming for their country and creating what is called a colony. So you have the mother country. So if it's France, France goes and sticks a flag in whatever territory they find in the Americas, and they claim that for the French monarchy. That's called the colony, and then the mother country is France. So what you have going on is all of these countries going back and forth from Europe to the Americas, sticking their flags in different territory and claiming it for their monarch. So the Spanish ships are starting to transport the gold and the silver that they're grabbing from Mexico and South America, the Aztecs, the Incas, and they're going through the Caribbean and into the Atlantic Ocean, and they're selling it back to Spain. Okay? And so what happens is, instead of the French and the English going out and finding their own gold and their own silver and claiming different territories that might have that. They're just waiting off the coast of Florida to take the Spanish ships and to steal their treasure. So this is being pirates, piracy, which was an actual thing, a huge thing. And so it's cheaper for the French and the English just to wait till the Spanish come along. And as soon as they turn Florida to enter the Atlantic, they're going to be attacked and they're going to be seized and their treasures will be stolen. So King Philip II of Spain, he decides that what he's going to do is he's going to start putting a series of forts along Florida on the Atlantic and the Gulf side. Okay, so he puts all of these forts, which are meant to protect the Spanish shipping routes and defend them against any pirates, which of course is going to be the French and the English. So as these forts that he establishes to protect Spain, he's also claiming that land, and it's a way of securing the Spanish Empire and remain in control of both his ships and the territory right there in Florida. So what happens, of course, is then the French start a rivalry between the two, right? Because the French want their forts too, and they still want to get the Spanish gold. So you have the French establish the Fort Carolina, which is close to Georgia, present-day Georgia, and then Spain sees it as a direct threat that, again, they're trying to grab Spain's claims of territory, and they're actually rivaling against the religious authority of the king. So King Philip orders the Spanish commanders in Florida to go and destroy all the French forts. So on September 1565, Spanish soldiers launch a surprise attack on Fort Carolina, which is the French fort, and the French are caught off guard, and they end up begging and pleading for mercy, and the Spanish show them no mercy because they're trying to make a point. Don't come over into our territory, and they slaughter everybody. Now these forts, they're like kind of, you got to think of like little villages inside of them, okay? So soldiers, they're going to need bakers, they're going to need blacksmith, they're going to need people to make clothing. So you have children, you have women, you have other people. It's not just like soldiers are in the fort and it's just all military. You have a whole little village community of people doing different things to basically live every day. So they slaughter all of the people. This becomes known as the French Fort, the Caroline Massacre, because they are going to slaughter women, children, everybody, although the people begged for mercy. And in this time, there's supposed to be like a civil code, a morality code in fighting. So to kill women and children, that was like a big no-no. So this for Spain, though, is showing the other countries, look, you're not going to mess with us. We're going to defend our claims. You're not going to steal our gold. We're going to be a force for you to mess with. All right. So in 1672, the Spanish begin to construct St. Augustine, a fort along Florida's coast. It's still there. It's actually one of the oldest ones that we still have. You can go and see it. So this fort is, again, to help protect the colonies, to help reinstate the Spanish claim authority. It is going to be made of stone, and it's actually not like stone. It's compressed seashells that they're going to use instead of using wood. they're going to use this. So this would be a technological advancement to build this fort so it can withstand any type of cannon fire, harsh conditions that might come along with the weather. And it is meant to secure Florida for Spain against who is their rivals right now, which is France and England. And France and England are getting very active in this region. They're still doing piracy, stealing the Spanish goods, and they're trying to take over territory that Spain has claimed. All right, let's discuss France. So we talked about the massacres that France suffered in the Fort Carolina in 1565. So France kind of just abandons Florida and is like, we're leaving this area. And they're going to head up to present day Canada. And the French are going to make friends with the Indians up there, and they're going to find their fortune in beaver pellets. So beaver, the animals, and then the pellets are their fur. And there's going to be a huge demand in Europe for beaver pellets to make different high fashion for women and for men. It made the hats that you see the men wearing. So it's going to be very profitable for the French, and they're going to start to establish their territory up towards Spain. And they're going to make partners with the Native American tribes. And this is going to become a big thing with the beaver trade. So the French are connected to the beaver trade, and that's connected to Canada, to the north. So they have different relationships with the different Native American Indian tribes. And they're going to start to exchange metal tools, cloth, firearms, for this partnership to help France establish this huge beaver trade up in Quebec, up in the Canada area. And they're going to make their money there until we go into the beaver wars. Okay, so then we have what's going on with the Native Americans, and they established this confederacy, which is just taking all the different feuding tribes who, like we talked about, we have all these different tribes in the United States. They never believed that they could own land like the Europeans. They believed that the land was there for them to use, and they had different territories. They had different hunting grounds, but they respected each other's space. So then you have all of the Europeans come in, and they're taking over the Indian land, and you have all these power struggles. So this confederacy is to bring some of these tribes together to help strengthen their resolve against the European invaders that are all coming in. All right, so we have the French explorer. Let's see what we need to know about him. He's going to come in and he's going to really write down, create maps of the location. That's the cartographer. I said that wrong. He's going to create and map that area so to help build this huge trading network in beaver fur. He's going to Chaplin's going to bridge the difference between the different cultures. He's going to go and he's going to live amongst the different tribes of people and help create this huge alliance between France and the Native Americans that are living in that area at the time. And he wants to create mutual benefit through the beaver trade, mutual relationships. And he does successfully create that, and you're going to find the French and Indians often fighting together. They're going to have this alliance that's beneficial to both of them over the beaver trade. All right, so creating middle ground in France. So the French create what they're going to call New France. They're going to create this idea of middle ground. This is discussing the understanding, the cooperation, the different practices between the French and the Native Americans through the beaver trade, kind of what we already discussed. They're trying to fuse the two cultures together, and they are. They're going to have your French marrying and having children with your Indian or indigenous people. Sorry, I keep going back to Indians. That's not a good word right now. Native Americans. So you're starting to create this unity that's just going to make the French and the Native American tribes in the area stronger, creating family lines, bloodlines. So to help increase the beaver trade and working together to just make a huge amount of money in that trade network. So New France begins with small outposts, grows rapidly, like we talked about. The Native Americans and the French are going to combine, intermarry, and create a huge community. And it's all going to be around the beaver trade and the huge desire that Europeans have for these new fashions, these hats, and these new different things that they need for fashion. So that want creates this huge need in the colonies. They need more beaver pellets to ship, to have over in Europe to create these fashions, these hats, and different things. So it becomes so big in Europe that they cannot keep up with the supply in the colonies. And this is going to be an issue. They're going to basically kill all the beavers. And so it's going to become a rivalry and an issue because without their main source, the beaver pellets, they're not going to make the money. They're not going to have what they need for the trade with Europe. But through all of this, they're actually creating this global market with the Native American communities. Okay, so now we have New Netherlands. So you have the Dutch, which is New Netherlands. You have the Dutch start to come into North America. Again, they're going to be north in that same area as the French. And they're wanting to also trade with the East, which is the European area. So they're going to be sending over explorers and private companies. So a private company like the Dutch West India Company. So let's talk about that. Dutch is who the country is sponsoring it. This area in the Caribbean is called the West Indies. The West Indies because Columbus had thought he had discovered India. And it was the Caribbeans, and it's in the Western Hemisphere. So you have what's considered the East Indies, which is India, in the East Hemisphere, where India has always been. And then you have what's called the West Indies, which is that whole Caribbean area that Columbus thought he discovered India. All right, so these private companies, what they are is it's not a monarch. It's a bunch of wealthy people all putting their money in to create a company because these expeditions were expensive. So it wasn't just one person, one rich person losing their money, a monarch losing their money. It was different private investors investing in a certain company. All right, so that's what the Dutch West India Company is. So it's going to set out to try and make some money like the other countries are. They're going to start in the north. They're going to have present day New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and they're looking at mostly commercial type priorities. They want to get involved in this fur trade. So another thing with the Dutch is that they believed in religious tolerance. Remember, I said before that religion threads into everything. So they believe in religious tolerance and cultural diversity. So that's going to be a kind of grab, if you want to come over and work with us in the Dutch, this is what we believe. We're not strong into Catholicism or any of that kind of stuff. So they create some urban development. They're, like I said, multiculturalism, so their acceptance to a lot of stuff. But then again, the thread is really that they want to get into the beaver trade. Okay, so in this private company, you have Henry Hudson. He's going to be your English explorer. What he does is he again is trying to find a path to India. And he is going to discover the Hudson River and the Hudson Bay. This is going to open up territory for exploration and trade. And he's working under the Dutch East India Company. So they're going to start to have different Dutch merchants kind of start to establish and claim that area for the Dutch. So what he is he is discovering different settlements, or he's actually key to creating different settlements in New York, close to Albany. He is going to help the Dutch East Indian Company colonize. They're going to start taking over what is now Manhattan to New Jersey, and they're going to settle this area different than the French did or the Spanish. They're going to settle it with a mix of ethnicities, and they're just going to encourage people to settle, to come over, to farm, and they're going to help to create a very diverse, economically driven colony. And this does happen. And they're shaped more by commerce, by economics, than they are by religious control, which is different than the Spanish and the other countries. The Dutch colonies in North America are also, like I said, they want the wealth. So they're not focused on religious conversion or creating territory conquest. They're really focused on the profit through trade. So you have the Dutch East Indian Company and the West Indian Company, and their focus is on fur, sugar, and enslaved labor. So part of the strategy, the Dutch in North America, they're going to need to help supply food and resources to their sugar plantations in Brazil and the Caribbean. So this sugar trade is what is going to really create a very hard and needed demand for labor, which is going to bring slavery into the discussion. So the Dutch become active in the Atlantic slave trade. So they are some of the first to introduce African slavery into their colonies. The enslaved people are forced to work on plantations in these settlements, and they're going to be a huge contributing economic success to the Dutch enterprise. But again, the primary goal of the Dutch isn't religious control, it is all profit. So the key part of slavery to their system was for commerce. So 40 years or so, the Dutch colony of New Netherlands, it's thriving, it's doing great, it's capitalizing in North America on the fur trade. The demand, like I said, for fur in Europe is huge. And they've partnered with different Indians, the Mohawk Nation. They're good with the Confederacy. And they build these mutual beneficial alliances with these groups. They also, like I had said, have a very different approach to colonization. It's more on commerce and corporation. They're into profitability. They're not into the religious control. They're there to make money, and that is pretty much it. So you're going to have, from the 1640s to the 1660s, a series of violent conflicts known as the Beaver Wars. This is going to erupt over that area of the Great Lakes and the Hudson River, the northern part of the country, and it's going to be over these beaver pellets. Like I said, the beavers are disappearing, so there are less beavers and less pellets. So the Dutch, again, are just seeking profit. They have these alliances and partnerships with the Mohawks and the other Indians. And as the beaver population declines, the Mohawks and the other Indians, again, remember, they know the land, they live off the land, and I'm saying Indians again, sorry, they're going to start getting worried, and they're going to start getting very aggressive and creating campaigns to seize new hunting grounds. Well, when they start looking for new hunting grounds, we know that the French are still there, and the French tribes, indigenous tribes, are still there, and they're also in the beaver trade. So it's basically going to be the Dutch and Dutch Native American tribes that they're in alliance with, and the French alliance tribes that they're in alliance with. They're going to be fighting each other for the territory, for the survival, for these beavers to try and keep, their trade going. Okay, so now we look at England. England, as you can tell, is very late to the game. So they're late to empire building, which is very interesting. They're late to the game, but then who actually controls everything will be England at the end before we go into the American Revolution. So they're going to make up their time quickly. They're going to, like I said, seize, just steal from the Spanish and the French and whoever they can. They're just going to steal what they already have. They're going to look and invest in the gold, the silver, and the furs. They've got some colonization that they're going to attempt themselves. In 1585, they're going to do their first colony of Roanoke, which is called the Lost Colony. And then in 1607, they're going to establish the really first successful colony in the New World called Jamestown in Virginia. And this is the first permanent English settlement that is in North America. And as you'll see as we go through this, it all starts to become about England and less about the other countries. So Jamestown will make their money off tobacco, which is called a cash crop, and they're going to become the central to England's colonial economy. And at the same time, England has also seized islands in the Caribbean. The Caribbean is sugar. That's where your sugar plantations are, the Caribbean and kind of the coastal areas of the Central Americas. So these are the main areas of the sugar plantations. And the sugar plantations, the work was so intense and so hard that an enslaved person would only last about 7 years before they would die and be replaced, because the work was so demanding and so harsh and cruel. So by the 1620s, England starts colonizing different areas. They are going to be in the colonization game for economic reasons, of course, but also for religious ideas. So the English in the West Indies had colonies like Barbarossa, which had a huge cash crop of tobacco and then sugar. So they are learning quickly from that sugar colony how to kind of plant their other colonies in North America to make them as profitable as can be. And unlike some of the other colonies that we talked about, there isn't this religious element. And when England comes along, there will be a very strong religious element to everything that they do. So they're going to use the Caribbean colonies to kind of model how they want the future English colonization to go. So in North America, they're fueled, like we said, by religious motivations. So between 1620 and 1630, you're going to start seeing the English Puritans come over and create colonies. You've got over in England, you've got communities that are based on Reformed Protestantism. You're going to see the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims are going to come over, and the Puritans. The Pilgrims want a complete separation from the Church of England. The Church of England was the church that was established with the break of being Catholic, because King Henry had wanted to divorce one of his many wives, and the church, the Pope, the Catholic Church would not allow it. So to get his divorce and cure that, he created his own church, which is the Church of England. Definitely a Protestant, not Catholic church. So the Pilgrims, they want a complete separation from the Church of England, whereas the Puritans, they want to purify the church. They didn't want a complete separation. They just wanted to purify the bad out of the Church of England. So you have the Pilgrims are going to come to the Americas in the 1620s, and they're going to create the Plymouth colony. And then in the 1630s, you're going to have the Puritans establish the Massachusetts Bay colonies. They're the ones with the idea of the city upon the hill. They're going to set up this colony to be a religious example to the world. And they're going to eventually, this is what will go into the Salem witchcraft trials and all of that kind of stuff. But you see the difference here is that English expansion is having the pursuit of profit, but they also have what I think a much bigger pursuit of religion and setting up their colonies for religious conversion. Okay, then this is just a little snippet of Roanoke, which was, remember, their first colony. So England first sets out with Roanoke, and it was more of a military venture. They intended to come back and resupply the base for England, but they never make it back on time, and it fails almost immediately. So in 1587, a second group of settlers come, of men, women, and children, and they're sent to Roanoke to kind of establish a permanent colony. But they're ill-equipped. They don't know how to work the land. They don't know how to farm. They don't know how to do anything. And the local native tribes, they help out the settlers at first, but then the settlements are growing so fast and they demand food and supplies, and tensions begin to escalate, and the natives withdraw and they just leave the English colony on their own. They stop helping them with food, they stop showing them how to survive, and they're going to be isolated and they're going to basically starve. When the English ships do return to the colony, everyone's vanished. and there's no real indication of what happened to them. So it's one of those mysteries of what happened to Roanoke.